I want to thank the Overton Hotel here, home of the biggest turkey club sandwich I've ever had in my life. It's massive, and I've got the bottom 2/3 of it still. I got in late last night and was hungry. Luckily, the hotel fed me, but thank you very much. This is a beautiful place. I've never stayed in a bigger room before by myself, so I'm pretty lucky to be here. I want to thank the Giesbrecks from Sioux, who I've worked with in the past, who helped, I guess, plug me to come down here and do this all the way from South Dakota. So thank you to the Giesbrecks. Thank you to the No-Till Texas for having me here. I'm honored to be here. I want to thank Dr. Edwards and RN and Dale and the other speakers this morning. You all did a great job. I have a reward for anyone in this room. I'm a big dung beetle fan, as you can see from the company logo there of the dung beetle. If any of you in here have access to the dung beetle that eats dog feces, please come see me. I have a huge reward for you. I will exchange all the work and services you need. I've got an old English sheepdog. He produces a lot of feces, so I need all the help I can get there. Tired of picking it up. Anyway, we are going to probably take about 20 minutes in the middle of my talk to take a nap. I realize that I have a real tough spot after lunch. It's usually around nap time, so I'm going to try to keep everybody awake. I'm your entertainment for the day. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm kind of a kook. That's how we do. Anybody else here from South Dakota? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm a kook from South Dakota. Yeah, I will represent South Dakota. We're kind of goofy up there. But I'm from all over the Midwest, so I just now call South Dakota my home. Anyway, I wanted to start out by sharing a little bit from a book that I grabbed from my office before I left last night, a book that I read about 10 years ago, and it's called Humus and the Farmer. That's the name of the book by the author Friend Sykes. Okay, this book was written in 1949, and what I'm about to read to you will make a lot of sense in 2025. For starters, this was a statement from a publication that came out in 1922 called English Farming, Past and Present. This statement was a simple sentence. The Black Death was therefore preceded and followed by disease in the livestock. Goes on to say in this same publication from the Veterinary Journal and Medical Press and Circular, this statement as follows. Everywhere throughout the world today, there is springing up from all quarters a biological consciousness, a sense that materialistic science may be leading us, that old and new insidious diseases are on the increase and are not yielding to orthodox treatment. Suspicion is widespread that this may originate in the soil, that the biology of the soil, of which we know too little, may hold the key not only for the eradication of the ills with which both man and beast are afflicted, but for the very preservation of life itself. And drawing that kind of full circle with what Dr. Edwards was saying this morning, it all goes back to the soil. And much of what I get to do with producers and growers of all walks of life is come at it from a soil perspective, a soil strategy. Figure this out. What do I push? The arrow? Where do I? This is the only slide. This is nap time. What do I? Right, left? Do I aim it at the computer? Awkward. Okay, fire it away.
I think it has to do with how high you pointed to.
Okay. Right? That force right there. Okay, tough crowd. Anyway, so I am not a farmer. I live in town. I don't even own an acre, but I work with growers. And I have enough cred to know that this is a real thing right here. I had a stickler many years ago who taught me Buckets 101. And that is you don't mix different kinds of buckets with different kinds of buckets. You sort them out and really keep the 5 and 6 gallon pails away from one another, just all together, or else this happens. So it's a little palate cleanser. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yep. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm a former art teacher. So yeah, my previous life in my 20s, I was a K through 12 art teacher. I also taught a little bit at the collegiate level of drawing, painting, photography, sculpture, ceramics, all that wonderful different modalities of art. I usually worked from the foundational understanding that those who create do not destroy. So I really liked working with the youth. And I had all these great things that I was going to say about this as I was putting these slides together. My slideshow presentations are usually very emotionally driven when I put them together. And I always wait till the last minute to really hone everything together because I want to get all the latest information up here out. But anyway, so this is my former life as an art teacher. Yes, that was a crayon relief picture I made of myself once upon a time. But I'm very used to the classroom setting and working under the modality, the umbrella of art. Next slide. Okay. Another form of art that I also like to really introduce to kids of all ages was something called environmental art. And one of my favorite environmental artists was a guy named Andy Goldsworthy. And what Andy Goldsworthy does is he goes out into nature, he gets commissioned to go all over the world and go into the landscape and use exactly what's there. The only thing he prepares for is the clothes he's wearing. So in this case, in the picture on the far left, he's gathered stones, native stones from the area, and he's oriented them based on their color and made such an orientation like that, where you have that gradation of color going in. The picture in the middle is leaves. He's done the same thing with falling leaves during the autumn. And in the picture on the right, he's selected leaves and created that actually on the stillness of like a little pond area or a brook. So, well, not a brook, but a pond. So anyway, this was something that I found very powerful in working with kids of all ages. And again, I taught in rural Nebraska originally. I taught in a school where one period I had 25 5-year-olds. In the next period, I had 15 juniors in high school. So the differences of maturity, the differences of interest was huge. And engaging them and keeping them engaged every day was also very challenging for 55 minutes. But one type of art that really connected with all of them was the environmental art. We would go out into the landscape and we would just create. We would find an area and whatever the kids wanted to do, they would create it. And yeah, I'd have these high school goofballs that would, pick up grass that had just been mowed and they'd just pile it up on the sidewalk and they'd say, there it is. And so, yeah, I was used to, not everybody was fully moved like I was about it, but I found that across the board, it was really a great way to connect these students with life, was taking them outside. Next slide. So, what the heck does art have to do with this, and why am I speaking at a no-till conference in Texas? Why am I here? Hit the button. Because that is this. This is my favorite definition of art. Art is everything that you don't have to do. Okay? So often, especially with like the older kids and even some of you in this room, you're probably thinking, I can't draw. I can't paint. I can't do, I'm no artist, But if you think about it from this perspective, if art is everything that you don't have to do, what is it that you want to do? That could be running a skid steer. That could be excavating. That could be farming. There's so many other things that you want to do and that you do in life out of pure enjoyment, pure passion. And that is what art truly is. It's what you are doing. We all have time until we don't. So we make the time as best as we can to try to do the things we want to do. Next slide, please. Next. Okay, you can hit play. So, again, why am I here? How the heck do I have anything to do with farming? You're farmers and ranchers and growers. Why is an art teacher here talking to you? Well, when I met my wife in 2005, happy 20 years to us, she had been diagnosed for about 5 years with Crohn's disease. And for those of you who don't know what Crohn's disease is, it's an autoimmune disease of inflammation, terrible inflammation in your colon. And she was very sick when I first met her. Still, I fell in love with her. But right away, I was joining her to her Remicade treatments at the hospital. And what Remicade was the Western solution, like Dr. Edwards talked about this morning. It was sort of the Band-Aid that we were using to treat her Crohn's disease. So essentially, it was a $5,000 clear bag of liquid that she would have administered intravenously. And she would go home and then basically be in bed for 2 weeks because a side effect of Remicade for her was rheumatoid arthritis. So for several years, as our relationship progressed, this was just a part of the norm. She was managing her Crohn's disease. I would join her at the hospital, do these treatments, and then we would navigate the side effects, right? The little label at the bottom, may cause diarrhea, may cause death, all those things. So anyway, we got smart. We started to consider food as our medicine. So we went down that organic path, right? Hair started growing long, right? You know, probably kind of got a little hippie a little bit in me. I'm a recovering hippie, just throwing that out there. But anyway, we started to really focus on what we were putting into our bodies, and it made a huge difference, right? So she went into remission. She really did heal herself through food. We saw it for years. We took things further because every now and then she'd get a little blip and she'd have a flare up, and then what that basically means is you start to pass a lot of blood. You start to lose a lot of blood when you have something like Crohn's disease. So we started to inform ourselves, inform consent, and look at alternatives. And there was one alternative called helminthic therapy that was available across the world. In a lot of developing countries, there were these clinics that specialized in helminthic therapy. A helminth is a nematode or a tapeworm, like you see in this picture right here. Unfortunately, in 2010, helminthic therapy was not legal in the United States. So we had to travel, obviously, to pursue this sort of interest in this Crohn's solution, this alternative option for her autoimmune disease. We had to go to another country to do so. So we flew down to San Diego. We had a van come and pick us up from Tijuana. Now, I know, I saw some eyebrows go up. I know you're thinking, Tijuana. Okay, where's this going, Zach? Well, actually, in Tijuana, by 2010, there is a reputable clinic called the Worm Therapy Clinic in Tijuana, Mexico, that took us down to the clinic, did a half-a-day evaluation of my wife, and they decided that she was a candidate for worm therapy. Now, how did that work? Well, they basically take microscopic nematodes, just like this, helminths. This is a human-derived whipworm is what it is, and I think there was 30 of them. And they put them on a really big bandage. And they put that bandage on the inside of the arm, because that's where your skin is most porous and fair. And the worms actually crawled in through her skin. And then like clockwork, we were able to track with the calendar when those worms migrated into her esophagus. She'd get really phlegmy. And we knew what day that was going to be because they said, oh, after it was like 11 days, you're going to get really phlegmy. When that happens, you want to then swallow that mucus, because that's your worms. That's how they get into your digestive system. We did it. And you know what? For 3 straight years, she was in complete 100% remission. And then when because that's about the lifespan of this very worm, this very nematode that you're seeing right there. And remember, back then, I was an art teacher, working nights as a produce manager at a health food store in Colorado. Like, I was just getting by in my 20s, trying to provide for a new young family. And anyway, I knew nothing about any of this. But what I did notice that this worked. Microbiology, something unseen, actually worked. And we didn't need the Western model anymore. And so in the 3 years of their life cycle, when the worms died, we emailed the clinic. They overnighted another little ampule of worms and a big bandage. She did it again. It worked. And that therapy worked for a solid 11 years. And then that whole crazy thing in 2020, which I won't say what that word is even, that whole thing happened, and she had a PCR test that had to happen so we were traveling, we had to get back into the country. She took one of those PCR tests, and they poked her so hard that it injured her brain, and the whole right side of her face swelled up, and her health just tanked after that whole event. So, long story short, we've had battles with Crohn's. My son, just in October, just got diagnosed also with an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. And I found out just recently I've got a brain tumor. So this might be my last show. No, just kidding. But I do have a brain tumor, but it's okay. Anyway, why am I saying all this? I'm just finally about through the jitters here. This is what, unbeknownst to me, introduced me to the world of microbiology and the power of microbiology and how human microbiology is very similar to what I would then come to find out when I went back to school. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. I'll just leave that up there for a minute. What I will say is when I went back to school to study soil ecology, lo and behold, all of that information that I learned earlier from the power of how the helminths help my wife actually made total sense when I started studying it on the soil level. Anyway, this is just kind of for visual reference. Do with it what you will. I own that book. I've read that book. I love this book, but that's just me. I'm not telling anybody to read that book. To give you kind of the long and short of that book, bitter apricot seeds. I eat them every day. They're full of vitamin B17. And if you wanted to know more about that, that's the book you read. The other picture is something that I recently stocked up on from one of my producers in Iowa that's a representative for Safeguard. So I got a lot of that now. Do with it what you will, but I'm just kind of throwing little nuggets out there. Next slide, please. Okay, so anyway, it didn't take me long, and now being back in school, not as an artist, but now in this soul science realm of learning about the power of fungi. And what I found out very quickly was I was taught by the right person at the right time and how to grow really abundant fungi. And I became obsessed with this whole component of fungus in our terrestrial ecosystems. And so what you see here is just a little snapshot of compost, and all of those white threads, all of those little mycelial networks, that's all fungi. And the white that you're actually seeing, it's called calcium oxalate. I shouldn't have eaten these up here. They're really bitter. And I know this, but it's like I don't have a chaser or anything. So I'm starting to paint this picture for you. I'm telling stories, okay? Today, this is entertainment. I'm starting to paint this picture, the transition from art teacher to what I'm doing here with farmers and ranchers. I learned the art of composting. It was the form of art that I want to do. And that is my medium of choice. I don't really draw or paint or any of that stuff anymore, those traditional art sort of modalities. Now I make compost, and now people have me come and basically perform for them how I make the compost in order to teach them how to do it themselves. So, next slide, please. I'm Wright. I am the director of the Living Soil Compost Lab. I am a social ecologist, you might say, and still an art teacher. I go on to farms and still under the premise of art is everything that you don't have to do. I work with producers and, oh gosh, thank you so much. You could tell, it was like clicking. Good, good, yes. And so anyway, I approach every customer I work with the same sort of principle in mind, and getting to know them and building that relationship with them is what is it that they want to do. With some guys, they want to be in that tractor and they want to go. Guys, gals, I'll just use, I'm addressing everybody here. They want to be in that tractor and they want to go. Okay, we find out how we can dovetail these kind of biological things that I'll get into more in this presentation, but definitely tomorrow, because somehow I'm going to be talking to you for about 3 hours tomorrow too. But I got a lot more practical things to share then. But trying to adapt these sort of different options, these more holistic measures of microbiology into our growing systems and figuring out the person and what they want to do. Because I've got farmers who manage thousands of acres and feedlots, and they could care less about any of it anymore because they are in the tractor pulling the windrow turner, making compost. Like they just care about composting now. That's his art. That's what he wants to do. He could care less about his corn and beans anymore. But that's not everybody. Some people, the composting, it's like another crop. It's a whole other chore. They don't really take that up as much. But anyway, they still realize and utilize the power of putting these polycultures of microbes back into their growing systems. And then it becomes a thing where it almost is an art in itself because they don't have to do it, but they want to do it. I'm based just south of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in a little town called Canton. Next slide, please. And for those of you who have never heard of Canton, South Dakota, this would, I would say, would be our unfortunate claim to fame. And that is we were the site of the only insane asylum in our country's history that housed only the Native Americans. So for 30 years, as the Western Expanse happened, we went into tribes, we as the government, the powers that be, went into tribes, and they took most of the elders, the medicine people, the people that had the old knowledge, the people that would refuse to speak their language, and they would round them up, and they would bring them to Canton, to the Hiawatha Insane Asylum that sits right outside of the town. It's not there anymore. Guess what is? Golf course. And where is the memorial that over 200 bodies are buried? Right in the middle of hole 7. It's really macabre. So, if you come and see me, because believe it or not, people from all over the Midwest come and they visit me in Canton at my office, at the lab, we hang out. We'll go pay our respects while we're there and eat some okay food too. So if any of you come up and see me, lunch is on me. We'll have a great time. Next slide, please. That's my family. That's my 16-year-old son, my 13-year-old daughter. We finally went to New York City over Christmas. I wouldn't recommend it. It was very busy, but it was a lot of fun at the same time. Yeah, so I'm a husband, a father, a coach, recreational composter. I can't help myself. You ask my kids, my wife, the back of my truck's usually full of something weird and dirty, but natural, like whether it be some roadkill or whether it be some dirt from this ditch in Kansas that the Holy Spirit moved me to pick up. I'm always collecting things in order to introduce it into this sort of big metaculture, as I call it, of compost that I do because I want to do it. That is my art. I want to make compost. I want to create microbes and let them prosper so that I can utilize them and help other people. That's another thing I want to do. I want to help people. So I'm going to try to give as much information today and tomorrow as I know, because I might never see most of you again. I know a few of you, and I've been to some of your farms in this room, but I might never see most of you again. So I hope that my goal with today and tomorrow is that you will take something from what I'm all over the place trying to tell you today and tomorrow, but you'll take something with you and you'll apply it to your own system. Next slide, please. So, I've worked in a lot of places under this whole guise of working with growing systems. I had the good fortune in 2015 and 2016 to live in the English Channel on an island of Jersey and represent Dr. Elaine Ingham, who at that time I was working with directly, and we developed a lab in the island of Jersey to basically represent her for England, Ireland, and Europe. And so yeah, we did it, we were successful. We worked with a lot of different types of growers. It was a great experience to take my family with me on, and I learned a lot. And then the other countries that I've also worked and consulted in as well. Yeah, enough said. The background picture is in Ireland. That is at Kilbrack Farms. They were a Zurich award-winning farm in 2015. Produce farm. They also have an apple orchard, and that's a big compost rick that I helped build as I trained them how to make compost the way that I was taught how to make. And so they utilize a lot of the technology that I'll be discussing with you guys much, much further on their farm. And yeah, they were already well on their way, but became very award-winning for what they were doing. Next slide, please. Okay, that's office number 2. I guess, yeah, in the past pictures, that was my office. Or maybe we haven't got there yet. I don't know. But anyway, that's office number 2. So that is where I spend most of my time in the growing season. I have producers that I work with across 13 states on farm as a part of their kind of team. And so I show up once, twice a year. With some producers, I show up every 4 weeks. And we go out into the field and we do all kinds of checks. We do all kinds of sampling, and I'll get into more of what I sample in a little bit. But anyway, I was picking sweet corn that day, parked next to the pivot. Yeah, I don't know, I like that shot. My truck looks tough right there, so I thought I'd show you because I'm a mall crawler living in town. Anyway, next slide, please. So, yeah, I've worked with row crops, food crops, pastures, pasture, ranch land, orchards, vineyards, landscapers, landscape companies, gardeners, master gardeners, who surprisingly, are there any master gardeners in here? Raise your hands. Okay, yeah, master gardeners, crazy. They don't know much about soil, like at all. It's really weird. But I get to work with master gardeners and do public lectures with them. I've worked with golf courses as well, all under this kind of umbrella of biological, ecological farming and husbandry. And that is one of my, I would say, most successful projects. This was north of Santa Fe, New Mexico. This was in Nambe. And that is a 92-acre hay farm, basically. So they raised horse hay. And the fields, that's a 10,000-foot view, actually. The fields that are lighter in color, I think I got a laser pointer. So like these right here, those paddocks, and this one right here were our checks. And then the rest of these fields right here were our treatments. And we basically rented a hydro seeder, which for those of you who don't know what that is, that's like a 1,400-gallon machine gun that you can paint anything you want that can fit through about an inch orifice into a landscape. And so for 5 days straight, we treated all, well, not all 92 acres, but all of these paddocks here with a combination of biology, and we did some overseeding with it as well of our hay, because they, historically, when I was brought into this project, their yields were going down, their tonnage was going down steadily for 18 years. And they were an organic, a horse hay, production farm that had a very high premium for their stuff, but they were only getting about 1 cut a year. In 5 days, we took all of these treated pastures from the previous first cut tonnage the year before. We took it up nearly 100% tonnage increase on the first cut. And in that first year, we went from having only 1 annual cut to 4. And then not to mention, there was 105-year-old apricot and apple orchards here. And then there was another orchard right here with about 6 different fruit varieties. We did the same thing with the hydro seeder there. They had fruit, and not only the older orchard, but for the first time in the 30 years since they had planted this new orchard, as they called it, they had a complete crop of every fruit crop that was planted in there, from peaches to pears to cherries to apples, in that preceding year after we treated it one time. So this was in 2015. This was kind of one of my proving grounds of what I was able to do with biology and composts and teas and all of that. So I like to show this picture because it's an actual 10,000 foot view. Next slide. Okay, that's my favorite definition of soil. I get called in to speak to kids sometimes, and they want, okay, just tell the kids about soil. What is soil? And my best definition place to start with them is that soil is the gut. It's the gut that covers our planet. Plants don't have digestive systems. That's what the soil is for. It is there to digest what the plant is feeding it through its exudates, and in exchange, giving it the nutrients back to it in order to support the plant. Next slide, please. I must have left a slide out. Anyway, so as a recreational composter, I literally compost everything. This is all of our paperboard, everything, all of our mail, everything, all the packaging that is biodegradable, I compost. Now, this was about 10 years ago that I took this picture. I've bought a paper shredder since then. And that's been a really nice addition into preparing all this prebiotic material, right? Prebiotic means food in order to grow my microbes on. So I'll take this, which is a total carbon resource, and I'll mix it with more of a vegetative resource, like back here. This is all grass and hay. And then I'll mix a little bit of a high nitrogen source with it. So really 3 components, a brown, a green, and a high nitrogen. And that high nitrogen can be typically manure, but it could also be things like beer mash. It could be things like grain in general. So oftentimes with producers I work with, we actually compost a lot of their grain that had been, moldy and neglected and whatnot. We just recycle it and upcycle it into humus. So this is kind of the beginnings of that pile, and then after about 30 days, this is what the pile looks like once it's finished. So it's gone through heat cycles of 130 to 160 degrees, and in that first 21 days, we've turned it approximately 5 times. Next slide. Okay, that just shows you the power of the heat, the thermophilic phase that we're creating by this kind of recipe that we're using. We're trying to promote that heat to not only sterilize the weed seeds that are in that material, but also the pathogens that are in that material as well. Especially since we're working with manures, we're looking at a lot of E. coli. We want to kill those. We want to basically create a fever inside of the pile itself in order to sterilize these things. And so this is the process of me turning it. This is the core of the pile right here, the belly of the pile that we're scooping out. And in the process of turning it, we're basically turning the inside out. And in 4 rotations, everything hits that gut of the pile once, so we've effectively sterilized it of anything bad that could be growing in the material using the temperatures. Next slide, please. So yeah, this sort of, I guess, hobby and art form of mine has obviously spread. This was a producer, an organic producer I worked with in Jersey, where we were composting right here. This is seaweed. So we would actually go down to the coast because it's not far. It's a 9-by-4 mile island, so you're always close to the coast. But we would go and harvest the seaweed, and then we'd dry it out. We'd rinse the salt off of it for about 3 days, let it dry for about a week, and then we would mix it into our compost material as our green component for our compost. This was in February, I believe. He had no external heating source in this hoop house. We were able to heat his hoop house and do all of his seed starts and have a microgreen business from it, all from the heat from these piles. Also, in having the piles off the ground like this, we were able to allow the CO2, which is heavy, to go out the bottom and to promote more CO2 within the greenhouse. So we had actually a thriving microgreen side hustle that came out of this sort of happy accident of building compost piles in his hoop house. Next slide, please. This then obviously started to get bigger when I moved back to the United States in 2016. I started working with producers in the Midwest, and volume becomes an issue when you're working with a lot of these producers. They have so much material to use, they got to do something with it. So here we're using a Bobcat windrow turner, made in America by Koima Manufacturing. If anybody wants to know more information about this, come visit me afterwards. I make $0 from that promotion, but I'm just saying I was able to help them demo their compost turner, which is really nice because everybody up north has one of these skid steers. It was a really nice little machine for mixing our compost up. So I like to show this picture because it really demonstrates the before of raw organic matter and then the transformation as we turn it and mix it together into humus. Humus, 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 one of my favorite words. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, obviously I got into composting and I started working with other producers around the country. I have zero social media. I don't do any marketing, which is really, sounds pretty ridiculous in this day and age. I'm largely word of mouth. Like the fact that I'm even here speaking to you is just, I'm so blessed, and I really thank you all for, if you sit through this and don't fall asleep, I'm really, really tickled. But anyway, I'm really blessed to work with everybody that I get to work with. I end up becoming friends with them and really getting to know one another. And that being said, I get asked to kind of go all over the country and help people upcycle their material. This was in Ulysses, Kansas. This is a compost turner that was actually homemade out of an old combine. I don't think box is the right terminology. I'm a city guy. So cab. It was a combine cab, and anyway, he made his own turner, and we were making compost on a very low budget here. There are commercial turners out there that we appropriate depending on how much tonnage that operation is trying to compost. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But needless to say, I have the good fortune of helping others realize the art of composting and taking on that other crop, which is the microbes. We really have an opportunity to utilize our wastes, see them as foods, and create this genesis event where we actually are breeding microbes and utilizing those back out into the landscape, all from our own system. So it's more of a closed loop system when we put that in place. So obviously we're doing this on scale. This is a customer of mine in Northwest Iowa. They compost approximately 100,000 tons a year for feedlots. Pretty limited feed stock, so the quality is about as good as we can get it, but our recipe is there that we're able to, from start to finish, we're able to make a very high humus compost. We're able to then go out and spread it in about a 6 weeks in time. When I first started working with them, their compost piles were still 160 degrees after about 6 months. So helping them with their recipe and just their overall management, we're able to move and process material much faster. And this is what 9 tons per acre looks like after it's been spread. And so in this particular context here, this would be southeast South Dakota right here. That farmer is going to put that down in front of corn, and then he's going to reapply that 9 to 10 tons per acre again after 3 more rotations. So after every 3 rotations, he will apply another 10 tons of compost, because as compost ages, it sort of unlocks in thirds. That's a very generalized way of putting it, but every year you get kind of a third of your fertility that unlocks. Next slide, please. So this was a cool one this summer. This was a newer customer of mine I've been working with since 2022 in north central South Dakota, dryland farmer. This is one of the farmers that doesn't even care about his crops anymore. He just wants to compost. And he did an experiment with rye where he applied, he's not sure if it was 15 or 20 tons per acre, and then he left a check strip in the middle. We work a lot with SDSU, South Dakota State University, to do a lot of our analysis of composting because they're very interested in it. And we got a 500% biomass increase. That was the only one that was shared with me in this kind of trial between Czech and the compost treated rye. This compost would have been spread the previous year. So I would venture, and this was this fall, I would venture to guess that we're actually going to see an even just as much of an increase this next year. If it releases in thirds, we will see another similar result if we do when we do this trial again this year. So just in the first year, we were able to really notice the difference in benefits to the plant. Next slide, please. Play. So that's when, with making this really good compost, we had to do something with it. And because we were making a different type of compost that we were building on pallets and we were turning it, and we were finishing with maybe 500 pounds of material, and farmers got 2 or 3 feedlots of manure's worth of material that we could be making a lot of compost with, that's different. There's compost, which I call little c compost, and that's the type of compost that we go out and we pile up, and even if we're just flipping it with our loader bucket, we're fusing the carbon and nitrogen together and helping with oxygen. As we turn it, we're helping that material break down and aggregate into fertilizer. That's essentially what you're making, is a very complete carbon-binded fertilizer. That's what compost is. Then there's capital C compost, which I give it a capital C. I probably shouldn't give myself that sort of right, but capital C compost is the type of compost that we're building in these bioreactor vessels, and we are applying just the right amount of moisture, just the right amount of air, just the right amount of attention in order to raise the microbiology that creates that compost. Because when you go big and when you go mechanized, you lose a lot of your biological component, a lot of your diversity. But when we're literally building with pitchforks oftentimes in these vessels and making 500 pounds worth of material, we're after something different. We're not after the fertility component, we're after the microbiology that creates that recomposition. So that decomposition, breakdown, and then recomposition into more and more complex molecules, which is what humus substances are. That's what we essentially come up with, is we have all of these teeming microbes in these vessels that we are then to put out into the system. Now, that system, how does 500 pounds, 500 pounds, that's not going to go very far, right? You're farming 200, 500, 10,000 acres. 500 pounds is not even going to do an acre. That's different. We have our fertility compost for sure, our fertilizer type compost. That's the kind of mindset where you would be applying it in tons. But then these bioreactors that we're actually after the microbes, and we're carefully creating it, and anybody can do this, by the way, but we're carefully growing all these organisms. We're using only a pound of that material per acre. And so how do we distribute a pound of that material out across 160 acres? We make what's called a tea or an extract. So when I was showing you that 10,000 foot view earlier outside of Santa Fe, that was one of the first times I was ever able to make tea at scale. And this was the brewer that I got to use. See if you could play it again. This is when I got turned on to compost tea, and this is with a Vortex brewer. And what I love about this video is you can't tell what direction it's going. But anyway, that's what we took our pound of material, or our 5 pounds of material, and we threw it into that and essentially washed that material, washed all those organisms, washed all of the soluble humus that we've created in our compost into a solution. Obviously, we filter it, and then we send it out through a sprayer. This is essentially what we do with farmers and ranchers alike, but not necessarily this particular brewer. I just like to show this off because you kind of get it, but like in 2015 when I was on Facebook in 2015 and I was posting videos like this, you know what people said? Is that your toilet? Why are you showing us pictures of your flushing toilet? They didn't get it. So needless to say, I got off of social media shortly thereafter because it was too much did my head in. So anyway, we make liquid composts called teas and extracts, which I'll go into much more a little bit today, but definitely tomorrow. Next slide, please. I like to call this approach the overall approach that what we're trying to do with producers is called 5 kingdoms agriculture. All life forms fall into 5 super kingdoms of life, right? We've got our crops, the kingdom plantae, those are our plants. And then maybe we have livestock, those are our kingdom, the animal kingdom. And then what about the other 3 kingdoms? The bacteria, Monera, but bacteria, fungi, and the protista. What about those kingdoms of life? Do we as farmers and ranchers, do we even notice these? No, because oftentimes we can't even see them. Most of them we can't even see. It takes a microscope to see those. By the way, that's the type of analysis we do at the Living Soil Compost Lab. We do microscopy. That is our niche. We do lots of microscopy, which I will also go into more later. Anyway, 4 out of these 5 kingdoms of life, believe it or not, in our capital C composting, in our bioreactors, we actually grow and multiply greatly in a very short amount of time. And that is the animal, fungi, bacteria, and protista kingdom. We actually can grow those with the right recipe and the right kind of care. We can grow 4 out of those 5 kingdoms, that 5th kingdom being the plant kingdom. So in our extract solutions, in these biological solutions that we're putting back out into the system, we're actually extracting 4, because believe it or not, there's microscopic animals that we grow in our compost, very easy to do. We actually grow 4 out of these 5 kingdoms, putting them back into the system. Thusly, we're promoting all 5 kingdoms at the same time. And in Ecology 101, through diversity, so the more kinds of things, breeds resilience. And that's one, I would say, deliverable straight away with just about everybody I work with that applies these biological compost extracts and teas into their system. One thing that they will get in year 1 is they will get a noticed return on plant vitality. They will have a healthier crop. They will have a healthier soil. Oh, wow, I didn't get any rust this year. I had no white mold this year. Because we are putting so many kinds of intelligent life forms into the system that they overwhelm the system and they do the work for us, which is what I also call 4th dimensional agriculture. With this sort of approach of growing everything and enlisting the help of everything, we're growing more time. 4th dimension being time. And if we're growing more time, and we have a healthier crop, we're less captive by that crop. We have more time for ourselves. We have more times for our golf game, or our kids, or our life. And that's kind of my goal, and that's really my goal in 2025, is to do less and accomplish more with all of my current customers, because some of them do so much extra because it's their art. They want to do it. They want to apply these life forms as much as possible, and they've made tens of thousands of pounds that they can do it. Still, they're in the field a lot, and they're getting home at 10, 11 o'clock every night, and their 3 and 4 kids are not able to spend more time with their parents. So I really want to value each and every one of you producers in the amount of sacrifice and time that you put into your systems already. I mean, my hat's off to you. I think farming in general is so fascinating. It really is one of the most admirable professions I think that there is in the world today, because you do so much, you feed the world. And you also have so much land that can carry a legacy with it. Whether you choose to see it that way or not, you have such an effect on the planet. And that's the old hippie in me talking, like, I want to make the world a better place. You know, I'm a recovering hippie. So I want to leave the world better than what, I guess, the way I found it. And so farmers have that opportunity because you husband so much land that you have that influence. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And that's why I'm so lucky to be able to bring all of these different ideas and options and alternatives into a system that currently is farming. Again, I don't know much about farming at all. I mean, I'm starting to understand it, and I'm fascinated more and more by it. But how to, I guess the niche of where I've found myself in being successful is how to supplement your farming system with your system, the context of your system, right? Context. It's all about context. How does it fit into your system as easily as possible? And this is my best solution. How many in here, raise your hand if you know what a fecal microbiota transplant is? Fecal transplant, okay, right? As a microscopist who does hundreds of soil samples a year, hundreds of compost samples a year, but specifically for soil samples, the majority of production soils from an ecological standpoint and looking at the food web and the bottom of the food chain, the majority of the production soils in our country, conventional and organic, are constipated. It's like they can't digest. They're stuck. This is the fecal transplant that we're essentially administering back out into the system. We're putting the organisms back out into the system to help the system digest again, because again, the soil's a gut. So we're trying to repopulate that gut with the right kind of microbes that we can grow on our farm from our waste material and value add that waste stream. Next slide, please. All right. So I won't say too much about this because these are just like single garden plants, but 3 of the same type of tomatoes, and the only difference was this tomato right here was grown in pure compost. This was from a producer, the compost was from a producer I work with in South Dakota. Yeah, pictures basically tell the story. And this was even in a smaller pot too. And this was just in grow, like ProMix, I think was the sterile soil solution. But anyway, all 3 of these were treated the same way. So I use a lot of amino acids with the foods that I give my growing systems, whether at a garden scale or whether at a large production scale. Amino acids, sea minerals, things like that, fish. These all got the same treatments, but in September, look at this baby versus these. It was just getting it that right start in just that solid hunk of humus that gave us so much more production than this. So anyway, next slide, please. I won't say too much about this other than this was all rye, volunteer rye that grew on concrete right next to the guy's sifter. So he gets his compost and he sifts it and he bags it, sells it. This was just the sifting material that kind of piled up on concrete. He was just tickled to see, obviously it grew on concrete when you look at those roots. He was just tickled to see that just that little bit of humus growing on concrete, that volunteer rye actually grew very well. Next slide, please. So this was a great one. This was in Hillsboro, Kansas. And around Thanksgiving in 2023, Glenn would have seed treated his rye. And when I say seed treated, he made an extract. So he washed his compost, his capital C compost, he washed it in a solution, and he seed treated his rye with it right here. So he went out into the field because I like to do a lot of root digs with farmers. We go out and we dig up the roots and see what's there. And then I'll take a segment of that root back. We'll look at it in the microscope. We'll have a laugh. Anyway, or we'll be like, yeah. But anyway, so we're going around, we're digging around the roots. We see a lot of these dreadlocks, these rhizosheaths growing on the roots here. And then we notice the volunteer rye growing 3 to 4 inches away, right in between the row. So we thought, well, let's just compare what that volunteer rye looks like. Did the biology migrate over? And here is a great example of that it didn't. So where we intentionally put that little tiny bit of biology on the seed before we drilled it, we were able to pick it up in the root health and overall plant health compared to the plant that was actually growing right next to it for longer that had none of that rhizosheathing. Next slide, please. This is something we saw a lot in central Nebraska, especially this year with several of my customers, where we are applying biological extracts. We're applying it through the pivot. They got water up there. It's sad. We applied it a lot. But anyway, we had these sugar deposits starting to form on our brace roots. Has anybody in here seen this on their corn before, on their brace roots? Okay, back there we got one. Well, anyway, this was something that was fairly new to me to see, but it was pretty consistent with everybody that was doing biology this year. We were not seeing it across the road at the neighbors. But basically what it is it's the plant's way of providing sugar to feed itself, to feed the bacteria that are not only on the plant, but underneath the plant as well, and to return that in a nitrogenous form back to the plant. And Dr. Rob, who will be speaking with me tomorrow, he'll go into more in depth about more of the science behind this, I'm sure, but that's, again, pictures say 1,000 words. That was pretty cool to see this year. And that is basically an artifact of what our biology was doing for us. And in this particular scenario, this particular context, we're still using a little bit of commercial fertilizer. So I'm not like dogmatic and like, oh, you got to quit all that stuff right now. I mean, we have to adapt with farming and still produce. So we're just trying to be strategic about when we're using our biology and getting it into the system. Next slide, please. So rhizosheathing, as I was talking about earlier, the dreadlocks of the plant, essentially that's telling us that our soil and our plant are buddies. All of those microbes are gathering around the plant and they're gluing aggregates, mineral aggregates and organic matter aggregates to that plant root in order to protect the root and also in order to exchange nutrients from the soil back to the plant. So it's a really good sign to see this, I would say, on any one of your crops, even after germination. You know, in May, we go around after planting and we pull up shoots and we see rhizosheathing form right away on the plant roots. And I would say by like August, you know, when it gets really hot, you know, it will kind of diminish in the subsoil of your roots, but definitely in that top 0 to 4, 0 to 6 inches, you should see that biological association with the plant in the rhizosheathing. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little teaser of the microscopy and the microscope world. My vantage point, much of what I can confidently come up here and talk to you about today is because I look at things really close. And I also teach farmers how to look at things close too. And those that want to take up microscopy, happy to teach you the Cliff Notes. There's also great online resources to learn microscopy. Come visit with me if you're interested in any of that stuff too. Other people do it. They do a great job. But if you want a crash course and you want to get right into it, I'm that guy that can come in and show you how to use a microscope very effectively on your own system. And what we're seeing in this photo right here, this is 400 times the naked eye. We are seeing a giant network of fungal hyphae. So those are little tiny microscopic pipes of nutrients that are very good at exchanging nutrients back to the plant in a mycorrhiza fungal form, mycorrhiza fungi, or in a saprophytic form, which is an organism that eats dead things. So fungi is good in that it can be symbiotic with the plant. Fungi is also good because it can actually digest a lot of our waste and residue material in order to form it into a humus again. Next slide, please. Okay, so last fall, I was working with a guy up in Minnesota who, this was his first year of making a liquid extract product. So he makes compost, he washes it, filters it, and sells it to farmers. And this was his first year trialing it. So he did some bean trials down by me in South Dakota, and he said, hey, I can't get down there. They're getting ready to harvest. Go out there and take a picture. I just go out there and tell me what you see. So I go out into the field, and you know, he gives me a map, but not coordinates, and I walk out to the field, and I see this, and I mean, I was just like ecstatic. I couldn't believe it. I called him right away. I said, Paul, I see it. I see exactly where you applied the biology, and I'm sending him pictures, and we're high-fiving over the phone, and we're just jacked. And then I realized that this was a different bean variety. Next slide, please. This was actually where we applied the biology and where we didn't. And so in one application of extract biology, and that was, I believe, 20 gallons. Yep, this would have been like an over-the-top about probably V3 was when they applied it. They did see a 5 to 7 bushel increase. So that paid on beans, considering they only used 3 gallons of his extract per acre and then diluted it in 20 gallons in their sprayer. So again, they're a washing material, they're filtering it, and then that's what they're applying into the system to help the system digest itself again. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is one of my favorite farmers I work with around central Iowa. This is Roger, and Roger's unique. I mean, yeah, he's in Iowa, home of the monkey soil, because anybody can grow anything in Iowa soil. That's why they call it monkey soil. Anyway, Roger basically does one application a year. He does it all in furrow and he's done. He's absolutely done. And I've been working with Roger since 2021. And in 2021, he started making his own compost. He was making what's called a Johnson-Sioux bioreactor method, which I'll talk a lot more about tomorrow. And anyway, so he started making his own biology on his farm. So basically that cost him his time and, sacrificing a couple IBC totes to put the material in. But other than that, everything was already on the farm. So he started farming microbes in 2021. In 2022, he started to apply his own microbes, and in 2023, so 2 applications. This year, Roger's hired hand got sick, and he didn't have help for his 1,100 acres. So he said, you know what? He called me and he said, Zach, I can't do the biology this year. I'm just going to have to do the other stuff, which are the foods. So basically his in-furrow program, his total freaking program, other than the 120 pounds of nitrogen, is extract biology, corn amino acids, fish amino acids, sea kelp amino acids, and a little bit of seawater. And this is a guy growing conventional corn in Iowa. Okay, just a little caveat. Every farm I go to, I get the same sort of response from the farmer. I'm the weird one. I'm the one that doesn't go to coffee anymore because I don't care about yields anymore, but I need help. I need something bigger. I need something just different. And I'm tired of corn and beans. Well, when you show them the crop of microbes, it kind of does renew their faith. And Roger was definitely one of those people. He was so sick of just doing corn and beans, collecting his check. He doesn't even run monitors on his combine. He just, because he doesn't want to be tracked. Anyway, he just goes by the weight, and that's good. Anyway, Roger fit that bill, and so in the last 2 years, he was doing just biology and foods, as we call them, prebiotics, in the soil. That was his whole program. His farm average for corn was about 180. His neighbors were probably 230 plus, but they were doing full tilt fertility and everything like that. But he was seeing so many benefits on his soil health side. And like his field tile was draining a month earlier than his neighbors, and the water was crystal clear. He was seeing all these other things, and that's another ubiquitous thing across the board. When people start using these microbiotic transplants back into their system, when they start putting them back in, they notice different things. It's not going to be yield necessarily. I mean, you're not going to be the biggest yield you've ever seen in year 1, but you're going to start noticing things you've never seen before. And Roger noticed a lot of those things. So for 2 years he did it. His yields were, he made money for sure, but his yields were still not, he couldn't go to coffee because the rest of the guys were doing so many more bushels than him, and they thought he was a goofball. Well, this year, he calls me and says, Zach, I don't have the help to make the extract. I can only put the foods in furrow. I said, Roger, full send it. Just do it. Just do it, because he was stressed out. And so this year, he omitted the biology, didn't apply it at all. Next slide, but I'll finish the story. Okay, so this is a little context of how Roger plants. He plants into cereal rye, and then he typically will do 2 post passes of herbicide. These would be enlist. This year he did enlist beans. And this year he had a good enough rye stand that he really didn't even need to do a pass of herbicide, which was great. On his corn, he didn't even need to do herbicide. However, on his beans, he did enlist beans. There was a little bit of weeds in there, and he wanted a clean field, so he did spray the 2,4-D in Liberty. I was at his farm in June, July, and August, and we're out doing field checks. We're pulling up plants. We're cutting roots and rhizosheaths off. We're washing them, looking at them in the microscope. One thing that I will give to you all today and my observation, which I think is very valuable, is the 2,4-D in Liberty did not seem to have as negative of an impact on the soil microbiology as glyphosate does. Now, I know I'm on camera. I don't want to commit suicide. I'm very happy and healthy. Look, I'm just saying it was a really cool takeaway to see from Roger this year that all of his stuff that he had sprayed 2,4-D and Liberty on, we had teeming biology, which told us something else. That biology that we applied for 2 previous years was in the system. We excited it with foods, but we didn't remove them. We didn't lose those microbes. So that was a really cool takeaway this year. I've never had that happen before in the 13 years I've been doing this, but this year we took biology by necessity out of the system, and we still had it in the growing season, which was really cool. Next slide, please. And this is what's funny about Roger. He doesn't even care about his crops anymore. He just wants to take pictures of the mushrooms and look at the different birds and the different insects that he sees now. And he cares about his trees and his lawn more than he does his crops. But this year, he averaged 250 bushel corn. So he was really happy, in that 120 pounds of nitrogen was all he used in two applications. So I think he did an 80 and a 40. Just the foods in furrow, he was still able to farm average across 1,100 acres about 250 bushels of corn, 60 bushel beans. Next slide. And this was at Roger's place also. These are his bioreactors, his Johnson Sioux bioreactors. And so essentially, this is a static method of making these capital C compost piles that you don't have to turn it. And I'll talk way more about that tomorrow. And so these were his piles, and we were just kind of consolidating 2 totes into one. And next slide, please. And it was cool because we took it out into the pasture where his pigs are, and the pigs all had scabies. I think it was like had a skin rash, just terrible skin rash. All of the pigs sprinted over, and we opened up because we had filled this full of water just to rehydrate it, and we opened up the valve of the IBC, and all of these pigs just showered and stood under the extract and drank the extract. The skin condition was gone the next day. It was incredible to watch. And of course, by the time I realized what was happening, I then go and grab my phone and it's almost over. But I mean, we're just standing there watching the pigs, and he's like, I've never seen them behave like this. But it was cool because we created this very healthy tonic, this solution that the livestock knew right away had some very valuable energy and food, and they understood the benefits of it in their very primitive ways. Next slide, please. So out in the field, just kind of some tools that I use. I do use a refractometer. I use a digital refractometer, and I also use a manual refractometer that's looking at kind of the immune system of the plant in season. It's good to have context with that. Like everybody who I work with that uses a refractometer, they carry a little notebook in their pocket. They write the time of the day. They write, obviously, the field. You know, they take those appropriate notes because Brix does fluctuate throughout the day. But this is something that we use as a metric to kind of see how healthy our crop is doing throughout the growing season. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. That was Roger's corn. But yeah, this was the biggest, and I forgot, I was going to talk about this at this slide, but this was what we saw in those enlist beans. We had mushrooms growing everywhere underneath our enlist beans. So I'm not promoting Pioneer. I'm not promoting the use of chemical fertilizers or anything at all, and biocides and things like that. But I will say that some of them are worse than others. And just a little teaser, I am working with a couple growers right now. We're doing a big study. Hopefully we have something to share in the near future where we actually are looking at different chemicals and, what are they called? The persistent chemicals, systemics, different pre-emerge and things like that. We're going to look at what effect it has actually on the biology. Next slide. Okay, I'll stop and open it up for questions here because I'll pick up where I left off tomorrow with this guy right here.